I'm the co-chair of the Standards Committee, along with Lois. I've been on the board for about a year. I used to serve as the mayor of Brownsville, Texas. I'm an attorney and currently in Austin, Texas right now. So bear with me while we go through these slides. This is really just an amendment to the 2022 accreditation standards. Y'all may recall we did have some comments and some discussion about this recently. However, in light of a couple things, we're going to have to make some amendments, which is why we're bringing that to you here today. Next slide. Like I said, I'm Trey Mendez, and I'm the APA Public Member Appointee, along with Lois Takahashi, the co-chair. Lois is an ACSP Planning Educator Appointee. Linda Tatum is here as well. Linda is an AICP Planning Practitioner Appointee, and she is now retired as the Assistant City Manager of Long Beach, California. And then Byron, I don't believe, is joining us here today. Byron Nicholas is a co-chair of the PAB and is the AICP Young Planner appointee, and he is currently chief of the Hudson County Planning Division. Next slide. Okay, so the Planning Accreditation Board, our mission is to promote excellence among planning programs and to ensure high quality education for future urban planners. As you all may know, we're made up of ACSP members, 3 educators, and 1 higher education administrator appointee. The AICP has 3 practitioner appointees, and then the APA has a public member appointee, and that's me. Next slide. So a little bit about the standards amendment process. This is the timeline here. The first step there is a standards committee. So we developed the first draft, which we did some time ago. It went to our board for review. There was some revision and an approval process of our initial draft. Then we did a 30-day public comment period for draft 1, and that's where we are now, which is why we're bringing it to y'all. Hopefully you've had a chance to review that and have some comments here, some feedback for us. The next step is going to be, it goes back to our standards committee. We'll review the comments and then we'll revise it as appropriate for the second draft, which will take to our board, the PAB for review, another revision, and then hopefully approval of the second draft. And then we will come to you again during the 30-day public comment period. Ultimately, we'll get a final PAB standards approved, and then hoping this goes into effect sometime January 1st, 2025. Next slide. So some of the overall changes, as I mentioned earlier, there was some developments that caused us to take a second look at this. Initially, it's really, as always, to try and simplify and clarify the standards. We've updated language regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion as a result of some case law that's made its way around the country here recently within the past year. We are trying to incorporate as much of that as we can into some of the updated language. Again, we obviously as a board don't necessarily agree with everything that we put in here, but we are trying to cover everybody and ensure that it does comply with current law. Notably the Supreme Court case that came out here within the past few months. So we have had to take a look at the DEI and hopefully crafted the language that will meet approval with everyone, or at least get some good feedback on that or how we can improve that. And then last, we did update language for student learning outcomes, assessment. That's been pretty important. We've been seeing that in some of our applications. We've seen the need for improvement, at least some fine-tuning and some tweaks when it comes to student learning outcomes. So that is the changes that we're proposing here and the changes that you should have been able to hopefully get a look at and give us some feedback on that. So I'll turn it over to Lois. Thank you.
Thanks, Trey. We're going to go through this rather quickly because we are hoping that you will look at the changes online rather than trying to read this text, which I can't even read, sorry. So I'm just going to go through this pretty quickly just to give you an overview of what's happening here, and then we will open it up for feedback. Okay, so, and for those who just joined us, we're recording this part of the session, which are our slide presentation. We will stop recording after we present these slides and then open it up for feedback from you. And thanks again to all of you who came to our earlier gathering to give us feedback on your ideas, the issues you're facing, the challenges you're facing in your own programs and institutions about a lot of these issues. And remember today, these changes are not just about DEI. I mean, I know that's a forefront of a lot of people's kind of interest, but we're talking here about changes to clarify the standards, as Trey said, and to highlight more clearly what we think are some perhaps misunderstandings about student learning outcomes assessment. So this is the preconditions. We had taken out the residence text there in an earlier version of this, and there's been some misunderstanding about needing a residency program in place before going to anything related to online, hybrid, all of that kind of stuff. So we put that language back in here to clarify for people that this is a requirement before applying for accreditation. Next slide. So this is the first standard on strategic planning and progress. And I know that many of you have gone through strategic planning processes. We're in planning, so probably should be doing that. So what we've tried to do here is to tighten up the text a little bit more so that you can be a little more clear on what it is that we're expecting at PAB. You can see here that we've taken out some text. So the strikeouts are about the wording that we're proposing to be deleted. And the red text is the addition. And some of this you'll see is just really about making things a little more grammatically correct because there's a lot of redundancy. I think people are misunderstanding some of the standards and thinking that they have to kind of redo everything again and again and again in their self-study report. So some of these changes are really about trying to clarify that so you understand that that's not what we're looking for. We're not looking for you to keep repeating everything you already did in the previous section. The DEI parts in, say, A3, you can see that we have changed the kind of way we talk about DEI in the sense that what we want programs to do is to tell PAB what its definition of DEI and social justice are. So we are not telling you what DEI and social justice are. In our conversations with legal counsel, and thank goodness for Trey Mendez, who's joined us recently, it's really about trying to understand what programs are actually doing and then using that as a standard for site visit teams to come in and assess whether or not you're meeting your own sort of definitions of what DEI and social justice are. So that's clarifying in part 3. That's what that is trying to do. Next slide, please. A lot of this is kind of grammatical stuff. Not much here. This is about standard 1. This is all kind of the public information stuff too. You post on your websites. Let's go to the next slide, please. Standard 2 is about students, and so you'll start to see some more substantive changes here. We took out, so diversity, as we all know, is more than just race and ethnicity. So in the sections that are referring to race and ethnicity as diversity, we've taken those text phrases out because we know that you and your programs and institutions are going to define diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice in ways that are appropriate to your institution. So we don't want to narrow the scope. We're saying that we want to hear from you what your definitions are, and then we will use that as a basis by which we assess whether or not you're trying to meet your own goals. Student quality here, not much changes. It's textual stuff. We're trying to, again, make things more clear. Next slide, please. Okay, so, and on the previous slide, there was a sufficient number of students for recruitment. So we're taking out things that we've heard a lot of feedback on from different groups, small programs, minority serving programs about what constitutes a meetable threshold. So remember, PAB is not establishing what your aspirations are. PAB is establishing what the base is, what the minimum standard should be for a program that's accredited. So student diversity, you see that we took out a lot of text here. We're proposing deleting a lot of text that's really about specifics about how you would do DEI and social justice in your own institutions, and instead revising the text to be more about what are your rationale for devising your activities, what is the definition that you're saying that you're doing in terms of DEI and social justice, and then tell us what programmatic strategies and initiatives you are doing at your own program to meet these goals and aspirations. Climate of inclusiveness stays the same. We move student support to a different section, so that's why it's deleted here. Next slide, please. You can see here that we did some strikeouts to try to make things more clear. We added a little bit of text here there was some confusion about professional planners, or they're the only kind of planners you're going to engage with. So, we're trying to make sure that we're encompassing all the feedback we got earlier about what sorts of things programs are doing, and trying to make sure that we're including that as part of our assessment process. Next slide, please. So this is standard 3, which is really about faculty. So remember, standard 1 is really about strategic plans. Standard 2 is really about students. Standard 3 is really about faculty. So you'll see here that we deleted similar text here that we did in the student section. So we're trying to be parallel in all the standard text throughout these amended standards. Also, we changed a little bit some of the text so that it's a little more clear. So instead of saying accredited degrees in planning, we're saying planning degrees from accredited programs. Some things that grammatically were incorrect. Next slide. That was faculty quality. So you can see here faculty diversity, very similar kinds of amendments we're proposing as we did in the student section, to try to shrink the amount of text there is, but also be clear on what it is that PAB is expecting from programs. So we're trying to take out things that sort of seem more prescriptive in how you do your work. So for example, in the first paragraph, the last sentence says program shall develop a holistic strategy XYZ. We took out develop a holistic strategy because you're gonna tell us what you're doing rather than we telling you what you're doing. So recruitment's very similar. We want to know about your goals. We want to know about how you're meeting your goals. We want to know about initiatives and strategies you're using to try to attain what you're saying you're trying to achieve in terms of DEI and social justice. Climate of inclusiveness, you'll see we added some text there to mirror what is in the student climate of inclusiveness section so that they're parallel. And then faculty support, we moved to another section. So we deleted that text here. Next slide. Professional development, you'll see we've deleted some text that is, triggering for some folks who are searching for text phrases like that. We're also trying to make sure that we are as broad and as inclusive as possible in what it is you're doing. So we're trying to be less prescriptive in how you do your work and more inclusive in how you plan to carry out what it is you're going to do in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice. Let me see. I think that's it on this slide. Next slide, please. So curriculum and instruction, which is where sort of the bread and butter is for a lot of the programs, relates to the core required curriculum, not electives. Remember that the standards relate only to the core that's required of all students to take. So you'll see that we've changed up some text here to try to be a little more clear on what it is we're trying to say. So that's the red text at the top. And that at the bottom, we're trying to reiterate again that the values, knowledge, and skills that we're going to talk about in a second. Actually, I don't know if we're going to talk about that or not. That they are included in the core required curriculum. So we're trying to make sure that that's super clear to people. So we added that text in here. Next slide, please, Jackie. Oh, yes. So here are all the changes that we made. So we're trying to make sure that we don't lose our commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, social justice, while maintaining, as Trey pointed out, taking into account all the advice and consultation we've been getting from all of you, but also from legal counsel. So we're trying to kind of be ahead of this. So we don't want to be doing these changes every year, right? We're going to put these changes into place, and we want to hold them in place for, we hope, a long period of time, or at least a significant period of time. So you can see we still have a DEI social justice standard for values. So those are not going away. We define them for us as things that reduce inequities and promote opportunities for all, needs for historically disadvantaged groups, reducing inequities, et cetera. But you're defining it also for your program. So this is the basic kind of fundamental standard for values that we want to see incorporated in the core curriculum. But how you do that is really based on what the program can do in the institutional policy arena and in terms of what's going on in your state. You can see sustainability, resilience, and climate justice. We did some kind of verb matching there. We added in the word resilient, so not really too many changes on that side. Professional ethics, still very much a part of AICP, APA ethical principles, which they've also been adjusting. So there's a lot of really interesting text there for you to think about in terms of your programs and its integration into the core. Next slide, please. So these are the knowledge and skills of the profession standard, and you'll see that we have tried to make some adjustments, but there's really not that many changes. I know many of you are kind of concerned that there were going to be whole slew of changes here, but there's really not that much in the sense that we still want you to include in planning history and theory, current practice, evolution of practice, history of planning. We've added in opportunities and how planning has advanced and hindered opportunities for particular people, places, and communities. We've taken out justice, equity, that phrase there as defined by the program, because that's in an earlier section. Let's see, planning law institution stays the same, urban regional development. We added, we deleted some text that we thought was a little bit confusing at the end about, movement and things connecting up, and tried to clarify that a little bit more with that phrase in red. All right, next slide. This is a big piece that we added in for this particular amendments process about student learning outcomes assessment. As Trey pointed out, we've been seeing kind of consistent sort of misunderstanding about what this is and what PAB is expecting. So we've added in text related to what constitutes direct and indirect measures related to student learning outcomes assessment. Indirect measures such as employment patterns or satisfaction with the program. Those are, you can put those in addition to direct measures, but really the direct measures have to be things that relate to directly assessing the knowledge, skills, and values that we talked about in the curriculum. So we can talk more about that later, but we've been seeing, as I mentioned, some misunderstanding about that. So we want to make sure both in the standards and in the guidance documents we'll be giving out to program directors and to site visit teams that what we're looking for are direct measures of student learning outcomes, not indirect measures in this particular section. Okay, next slide. So governance, we changed up some language here because of the guidance that we've gotten from legal counsel about how we address diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice related to promotion and tenure. So you can see that we've taken out a bunch of specific language and more change the language to say that diversity is defined by the program. And so we are going to assess your progress and efforts based on what the program is saying that it wants to do, it's going to do. Next slide. So that is the end of the slides. Again, this is the first comment period on this first draft. Again, we thank you for your earlier feedback on as we were trying to think this through. This is the first draft, so comments for this period are due by July 14th. We know it's summer. We apologize for that. We're trying to get this done before programs who are going to submit their self-study reports in 2025 so that they know what the standard is going to be, so that they have that. So we're trying to get this through in a kind of a good amount of time here. So this first comment period is July 14th deadline. There, as Trey mentioned, we're going to have standards committee is going to go back and look at all the comments and feedback, make adjustments, and then there'll be another public comment period later after we get out this second version of our amendments draft. So comments, your written comments are always valued and welcomed. And so we want you to use that forms link, which I think also Jackie can put into the chat box so you have a direct link to that, where we would welcome you providing us with written comments and feedback. I think that's the end of the slides. And Jackie, could you stop the recording?